So where do you want to go from here? Do you want to fire me, or do you want to learn from me? And that's really the choice that they get, because it doesn't make any sense for them to continue down that pathway.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Real Agile or BS. We love answering all of your Agile and Scrum specific topics. And today we have one that you've probably heard about before, but we're going to take a stab at it and see whether it's true Agile or not. The whole idea is epics. Are epics real Agile, or is it BS? Bob, I'll hand it over to you first.
Wow, epics. That means so many different things to so many different people. Is an epic a big user story? Is an epic a collection of user stories? Is an epic a project? I'm not really sure. I've seen it defined all kinds of different ways. I think the word is used a lot in Agile organizations, so I think there's some validity to the word. I'm just not sure we have a definition for really what it is. So I'm not sure I can even answer the question, Peter. Give me a little more insight. What do you look at as an epic?
Listen to this guy. 2 decades plus experience, and he still can't explain epics. 30, actually. Don't want to give away your age. Epics. So it's really interesting that you've ping-ponged it back to me, Bob, because if we look at the Scrum Guide, there's themes, there's epics, there's user stories. This is kind of a typical breakdown of sorts. I think what's most important, and you've certainly had experiences like this as well, is one of the biggest problems in organizations is they don't use the terms consistently across the enterprise. And so I've worked with teams who use the word epics over here. Then I've worked with another team in the same organization who uses the word feature, or they use capabilities, or they use some other moniker to describe this large idea. At the end of the day, I think it's important that the enterprise create a standard definition of terms. I think this is a great thing that we can also add to a working agreement or a Scrum values exercise, which I've talked about with clients before, of making sure that we have dialed in our terms, and epic means X, and theme means Y, and user story means Z, and a task means, A, these types of things. And so at the end of the day, determining and defining those terms is absolutely essential, because it allows us to be on the same page and using the same vernacular and same expectations. But let's just get to the definition of epic. I see it merely as a large idea, a large conglomeration potentially of user stories that need to be extracted from that epic so that we can slice them up, deliver on those pieces, and validate correctness as soon as possible. So regardless of how your company wants to spin it, a common definition is very important. And number 2, it should move us to action, to say this epic, this idea, far too large. There's no way that we should ever commit to this epic in the sprint. We got to break it down. We got to bring in the engineers to slice it up so that we can figure out where the functional value lies, so that we can deliver something relatively quickly to the product owner to validate whether we're on the right track. What say you, Bob?
Well, I do want to correct a little bit of what you said, because you said themes, epics, and user stories are in the Scrum Guide, and they're not. Oh, wow. They're generally accepted Scrum practices, as Mike Cohn would call them, GASP, G-A-S-P. But the concept of epics, while I agree there are things that are big, and they shouldn't go into sprints, I think that's important. I think it becomes, I guess, real Agile that you're always going to have things that are big, whether you call them an epic, a feature, a theme, a big thing, a capability, whatever it is. You're going to have some idea of things that are bigger than sprints. And the concept of saying we have to take those big things and slice them into smaller things, absolutely positively, that's a core aspect of agility. Our colleague Richard has always said that user story splitting is a keystone habit for great teams. They have to have that, or they can't actually move forward. They can't be great. If you can't slice user stories down to make them small enough to fit into sprints and make them be things that you can actually attack, you've got no chance. So I think where it becomes real Agile is you have to understand there's big, and then there's right size. And everything is big until it's right sized. And I actually got out of the game of saying, I don't really care what you call it. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it a crazy old big thing. I don't really care. But as long as we understand that it's not going into your sprint,
Mm.
because that's where you start to get into trouble. And there are teams, as you know, you've seen this. They take a big thing and say, "Well, we'll just start it this sprint, and then we'll keep going on it sprint after sprint until it's done." And at that point, I'm like, "Okay, why am I here? Because you're not even thinking about Agile at that point. You're not going to have anything that's a remotely usable product at the end of every sprint. It's just not. You're not doing it right. So where do you want to go from here? Do you want to fire me, or do you want to learn from me?" And that's really the choice that they get, because it doesn't make any sense for them to continue down that pathway. So I think as far as it being big, yes, it's got to be part of Agile. I'm not big on the word epic anymore. I think a lot of software like Jira and others like that epic word, and I just think the word epic gets us thinking the wrong way. It gets us thinking really, really big. Like, let's throw everything into this epic, when in fact I'm trying to get everything out of the epic. I want to get the epic to be smaller. So having it be an attractor of size to me is a wrong idea. So I don't like the word, but the concept is definitely part of agility.
It's interesting that you say it that way.
There we go. We have a cat in our picture.
That's perfect.
I got it, you silly.
I think it's interesting you say it that way, because there is, I appreciate the banter back and forth, because as for all of our viewers out there and if people watch this stuff, Bob and I don't always agree on everything, and that's what makes it great. And actually, this is something that I just learned about, Bob, that you don't care about the word epic as much as I assumed or asserted that you may. For me, at the end of the day, I'm completely in alignment with you. It has to be broken down. Like, it doesn't matter if you call it an epic or a dishwasher. It's far too large. It needs to be functionally decomposed and understood at some level, so that we can say, hey, this is something that we can deliver during that time box. We can get validation and sign off from a product owner. We're headed in the right direction. And I think that is what is the most agile thing about epics, is this idea of, if you have an epic or any type of large idea, you got to break it down. Or as I like to say, we've talked about this before, I like to say hammer time, because I like to make fun of myself, right? You got to hammer time it. You got to break it down. You got to break it down. So I think that's really the most important thing here. So is our epics real agile? I think we could say they fit within the theme and kind of the construct of Agile. But I think the most important thing here is that we take action on those large ideas, those epics, and make sure that we can break them down and understand them, so that we can deliver them in a time box period. What say you, Bob?
I agree. I think there's the concept of big, there's the concept of small, and we have to understand that concept. And whether you use the word epic or not is totally up to the individual organization. I agree what you said earlier about having a definition of terms. What does epic mean? If you're going to use theme or feature or whatever it is, what do all those things mean, so we can be consistent about it? I think that helps teams when they're talking to each other, because as we all know these days, no one team creates anything by themselves anymore. It's going to be a multitude of teams working together. So how do we communicate those ideas effectively between us? If you want to use the word epic, I'm fine with it. If you want to use the word capability, I'm fine with it. If you want to use the word theme or something else, it really doesn't matter to me, as long as we have some consistency that those things are big. That to me is the bottom line. And that to me is very agile. We have to understand that concept.
I agree. Well, guys, there's so much information on our agileforall.com site. Bob earlier had talked about Richard Lawrence, a previous colleague of ours, who's created a wonderful user story splitting cheat sheet that you can download from agileforall.com in the forums. So make sure that you check those out. We thank you guys so much for joining us in today's Real Agile or BS. Let us know if you have comments, suggestions, or ideas to the contrary of our ideas. You can always post those on agileforall.com. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys on the next one.